Having to replay SRB2 with an overpowered modded character to get a completed save file is kind of a lost art with the release of v2.2.10, what with the changes to how saves function, meaning that different characters can't operate the same save file. Even so, I've been playing through the game again with EggRobo, a character I covered a very long time ago on the channel, but I've never actually reviewed them in any kind of detail, so I feel it's time to change that. Let's dive in. EggRobo has, quite possibly, the simplest moveset of any non-gag character. They have two abilities, as well as a sort of passive effect that combine to make them an extremely maneuverable, but very slow character. At all times, you'll see that EggRobo hovers very slightly off the ground. This isn't purely visual either. You can walk over the electrified floors in Techno Hill, for example, and to actually touch something like a button or an animal capsule, you first need to give yourself a bit of height so you can actually hit the ground. You bounce a set distance off the ground, so EggRobo is still somewhat affected by momentum, not that it'll come into play very often, but you also have very little friction, so EggRobo is extremely slippery. Your spin ability is basically a modified version of Fang's pop gun in that it fires off a series of shots, meaning you can hit multiple enemies or look side to side to hit a wider area, but you need to charge it for a second before firing, and the tracking doesn't seem to be as good. Actually, it's more like the tracking is very inconsistent. It works very well against enemies and monitors, but it seems to be complete crap against bosses. Having tested it against a fair amount of the early bosses, I thought it might be to do with the movement of some of them, which would be fair enough. Tracking can only really be expected to go so far. But even against stationary bosses like Egg Colosseum, it can only land hits at seemingly random. But EggRobo's signature ability is their jump. Now, considering we're looking at a character in a 3D platformer, there's certain abilities that are more powerful than others. Just by comparing the base roster, we can all agree that Sonic's Stock is less powerful than Tails' Fly, right? Well, EggRobo's jump is basically infinite flight, and it is just as powerful as it sounds. Holding jump allows you to ascend upwards, and unlike most other flying characters, there are zero caveats. No fuel, no stamina, you aren't put into a vulnerable state upon letting go of jump, you can let go of jump and then hold it again to begin flying again. It can be used underwater, it can be used in anti-gravity, it can be used in boss fights. There are no downsides to this other than you aren't damaging in this state, although that does also have the benefit of meaning you are in a permanently actionable state. This is the kind of ability where you need to lay down how you look at scoring abilities. This is completely OP, which some people would say means it be given a lower score. After all, solely the fun in playing a character is learning how to balance their strengths and weaknesses. Others would say that the more broken a character is, the better. Who needs balance and such, as long as they're fun to play? Personally, I prefer to look at the intent behind a character. Clearly, EggRobo's dev clairebun wasn't setting out to make a genuinely planned out, well-balanced character. They were just making a character who could fly everywhere. And honestly, I think EggRobo is balanced. Sort of. I mean, for a beginner, this is perfect for completing all the difficult levels and getting all the hidden emblems, but when you start looking at them as more of a veteran, their shortcomings become more apparent. They can't handle slopes, for example, or the fact that despite their incredible mobility, they lack the speed or movement options necessary to actually post any sort of decent time in a speedrun, which becomes sort of the main appeal of any platformer after a certain point. Overall, a good moveset for beginners, but it lacks the depth an experienced player might crave. How many people here remember that there are EggRobo sprites already in the game? Considering how little time you spend with them, and the fact you don't even need to interact with them, I'm sure many people forgot that the spectators for the Egg Colosseum fight are EggRobos, and so most of the mod sprites are ripped from there. This gives the benefit of the mod perfectly fitting in with the vanilla art style, because it is the vanilla art style, but it does sort of mean that EggRobo has very little in the way of interesting animation. To be fair, they are just one of thousands of mass-produced military robots, so I doubt they even have a personality or quirks they could really express through animation, but I feel there has to be a middle ground between that and just using the one sprite for pretty much everything. The only changes the sprite ever has are their eyes glowing red after being damaged. I feel even just having them recoil back after firing a shot, like in Sonic Generations, would lead to a more satisfying to use character, as they currently really lack any oomph in their abilities. Overall, as I said earlier, EggRobo is definitely a character made for beginners to the game. In that role, they perform exemplary work, perfectly suited to fly into hard to reach corners of the map and collect emblems and the such. But for a more experienced player, they really lack substance. There's just no satisfaction to playing as EggRobo, whether that be the minimal speed you can reach in comparison to other characters, or the disappointing lack of animations meaning you get no feedback from, well, anything really. I feel a 6 out of 10 is best. I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.